Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. It's Allan Laboucan with the Rocks and Stocks News Show. I've got an excellent company to talk about. They recently became a sponsor of my shows. Their name is Athena Gold, and they've got the making of a very exciting new oxide discovery in Nevada on the Walker Lane trend. John and Dave, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Alan. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
So in preparation for this show, we wanted to bring Dave on because he has a lot of expertise in the Walker Lane trend in Western Nevada, specifically in the Bullfrog mining district. And that area has got very much attention of late. Anglo Gold, Ashanti is sort of planting their flag into that area. They've taken over Corvus Gold and another project, and then they're drilling to the east of that. They're finding a 4.2 million ounce oxide gold deposit, and then Athena is about 50 or 60 miles to the north and finding very high grade oxide. So Dave, why don't you give us a rundown on your experience in that Walker Lane trend?
Well, Alan, I was president and CEO of Bullfrog Gold Corp from 2011 up until 2020, when I did another deal with Barrick and Augusta Gold, where they took over management and they had funding. Augusta is well heeled. They've had a very successful track record globally, for that matter. In fact, over the past several years, they've sold about $5 billion worth of properties. So the Bullfrog area has attracted a lot of attention. We first went out there in 2011. Corvus was out there. There wasn't too much interest. But the fact of the matter is, the deal I did with Barrick, I had over 155 miles of drilling data. And without even drilling a hole, I was able to get 43-101 resources of about 600,000 ounces of M&I. So that was without drilling a hole, and that's mainly because we're looking at heap leaching. Now, when you relate this to Excelsior Springs, when I first got involved with it, it came to my attention when I was with Bullfrog, and I didn't pursue it for one reason or another. But when John called me after I did the Bullfrog deal, I've known the geologist that's been involved with this, Ken Brook, out of Reno, for over 40 years. And we both concluded that, look, this is very high grade. I mean, if you have a mountain of low grade material, and I've run low grade mines. In fact, I built Highcroft Resources and ran it for 5 years. But when you start out with high grade and it's relatively shallow, and yet it's open on strike toward the east and the west, I mean, this is quite exciting. And when we first discovered this hole that had 55 feet or so of, it was, DB23 had 55 feet of 10 grams. And, it's only about 140 feet below the surface. Now, we drilled additional holes immediately east and west of there and basically got the same thing. In fact, one of the new holes we did in our phase 2 program actually had the highest grade thickness product on the whole property. So this is something that it's been established. Now we need to raise enough funds to go trace this thing out to the full extent of the strike and up and down dip. And also, it's our belief that we possibly could be next to something big. And this is going to take some significant exploration, but what we want to do right now is trace this high grade that's shallow. After we drill the thing out on strike that's shallow, then we can better select the holes we want to put out at depth and see how deep this thing goes. And I think once we start bringing in about 500,000 ounces of potential resources, when you're looking at 1 gram of heap leach material, I mean, that's a mine. So this is what our objectives are, and we're quite enthused about getting additional money to go ahead and trace this thing out and fully explore and develop this thing to make it the best that it can be.
Well, we not too long ago, John and Don Strachan and I had an interview, and some things really popped out from that interview with me. There's a east and west fault, and right in between that fault is a big alteration zone. And then you've also got right in that alteration zone is where you drilled those 3 holes. And by the way, if you sort of put it in the context of other oxide deposits, you're talking about many multiples of the grade that makes oxide deposits. So you could almost call it bonanza grade for an oxide zone. And the runway for expansion is very extremely big based on the faulting and the alteration in between it.
Well, that's correct. I mean, the main buster zone that had been drilled out, when Athena took over, there were 84 holes, and we've taken that up to now 104 holes. But the stuff we've been finding in our phase 1 and 2 programs have been much higher grade and, solid thicknesses and relatively shallow. So this is even better grade than what they actually had discovered in the past. So, and again, this thing is open to 1,000 feet to the east, where there's another hole, an existing hole, that's got 80 feet of 1 gram, and it's only 20 feet below the surface. Now, I'm not going to tell you that you can draw a straight line between that and say it's going to be resources, but gosh, when you have that kind of an intercept 1,000 feet away from this high grade, I can't imagine this thing has legs, and we're going to go ahead and explore it to the full extent so we can actually get enough resources to take this thing on into development. And, when people always ask, do you want to mine or do you want to sell it? I always say we want to do what's ever in the best interest of the shareholder, period.
Well, and I don't think it's a lot of arm waving between where the drilling has happened and that eastern extension, because you've got that corridor of faulting plus alteration in between there. Just for my audience that's non-geological, alteration is very important, because when the fluids that carry these gold-bearing fluids make their way and hit the country rock, it chemically alters that rock. And actually, you can see it quite clearly on Google Earth. And so when you have a big alteration package and you're getting holes underneath it with mineralization, you've got a pretty big runway there that tells you there's some big event happening.
Yeah, and Dave, maybe you could talk a little bit about the anomalous base metals that we saw with the high grade gold, and what that's telling us and where it's leading us.
What we're finding is in most of the high grade intercepts, and I'm talking about most of them, you've got a lot of lead, zinc, and copper. And usually in an epithermal system, you don't have lead, zinc, and copper in the same identical zone. And we postulate that the base metals and precious metals were all deposited at the same time, and then they were oxidized with surface waters. And so these base metals, they're not economic. I mean, they're not high enough to be economic, but they're strong indicators. And you can actually, when we've done this, use an X-ray diffraction device, a field device, where you can run that over cuttings. It doesn't detect, gold that's only in a couple of gram grade area, but it will detect the lead, zinc, and copper. And that gives you a strong indication right there in the field with drill cuttings, as well as surface samples, or even looking at anything underground. And I know John did some sampling of dumps from the old historic underground mining, and it has the same correlation. So this is something that's It's not unique to this deposit, but it's not common in the typical classic epithermal system. But here, I mean, we're after gold, and this actually serves as a benefit to help us further explore. When we're drilling holes, I mean, yeah, you can use color and so forth and the alteration aspects, the lithology. But when you have an XRF device to help you assist that and you're getting strong base metals, that correlation is very strong here. So it's a great tool for us on exploration.
Now, this brings up an interesting thing to me, Dave, because over in Eureka, ATHA Gold has been drilling a CRD with very high grades of zinc, lead, and silver, with an overprint of high-grade gold to bonanza-grade gold. You brought this question into my mind as to what could be the mineralizing system here.
Well, it's, you know, when you in a epithermal system, when you start reaching base metals at the base of the system, that means you're at the bottom of what we call the boiling zone. That's where these ascending solutions raise up, the temperature drops, the pressure drops, and it precipitates out. And that's what causes most of the epithermal gold deposition in Nevada and anywhere else in the world. Whereas here, we don't think this is something, I mean, there's other mesothermal deposits, and these are higher temperature, higher pressure, and deeper, but we think this is still an epithermal system that just happens to have the base and precious metals depositing out in the same interval and then being oxidized.
And then in the epithermal model, that could be leading you towards a porphyry.
Well, a lot of epithermal models, actually, there isn't often large porphyry systems under them. So when you chase these epithermal systems and the systems we have at Excelsior Spring, this could lead us into something else that's quite large. I mean, whether it's a porphyry-based metal with precious metal credits or whatever, but I think you do have the potential to find something big in this area. It just hasn't been explored really on the micro scale fully, and on the macro scale, we still have all of that potential available to us.
It's a real gem of a project. I'm quite surprised that more people aren't paying attention, but I'm certainly trying, John.
Oh yeah, you're great. No, we're really excited about what we're doing, and I'm really fortunate to have guys like Dave. I've got what I call like the dream team of people like Dave, and you met Don and Ken Brook. These guys all have decades of experience in Nevada and lots of success. So, we've got all the pieces. We just need to go execute.
I was doing a little bit of homework on one of my favorite exploration tools, Google Earth. And another interesting development that you guys had is you acquired a bunch of properties to the south. And yes. There's a structural intersection of a north-south fault and a east-west. And right where they come together, it looks like the historical geophysics may have caught an anomaly there that you need to do more. You're going to do more geophysics in that area, right, John?
Yes, and Dave, maybe you could touch a little bit about that anomaly and that structure there, because you've looked at that closely as well.
Well, that's an induced polarization anomaly, and the highest anomalous area is actually on the south part of our property, where we just staked additional claims to cover that whole target. And that has great potential. I mean, what IP does, it detects sulfides. And where you're in the oxide zone, IP really doesn't give you a lot, but it could be indicating that as the sulfides are picking up at depth, you could have something that goes down to great depth below the system we're in. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of deposits, epithermal deposits, that beneath them, the main heat pump or heat engine that brought these mineralizing solutions upward came from a major intrusive or a porphyry deposit, either in base metals or precious metals. So that anomaly is there. We've looked at it we didn't drill it the past two programs because we had such higher priorities chasing 55 feet at 10 grams. So we wanted to chase that first, and then we'll follow up with that as we raise additional funds. So, I mean, there's several targets that you got in our West Slope zone. You've got this southwest anomaly to the north of there. There's another hole that's got 600 feet of 100 ppb gold, which is not a barn burner at any means, but it does mean that there's a lot of solutions that went through there, and it may be adjacent to something that could pick up both in size and quantity and so forth. So, I mean, we do have a lot of targets, and to chase with great certainty now. Now that we've put some more holes in there, we can outline these holes. But bear in mind, when we first had that discovery hole, we did not know, and no one knew what the strike and dip of that thing was. So the phase 2 program, we had to go ahead and reach out and put in some holes. We did connect on the two of them, very much so. But some of the other holes we didn't connect because it's just not along the same strike that we now know was there. So we've learned a lot about this, and our next program, I think we can design that. We've got more tools in our chest for exploration, and I think we can carry this thing out, and we'll go ahead and trace it until it stops, wherever that is.
Well, that southwest zone area really has me intrigued because of the where two faults come together, and then right in there is the geophysical anomaly. But I think you can also see some alteration coming up from that into the area where around where you've been drilling.
Yeah, and I also think that the fact that Dave and his team are theorizing that this was originally deposited as a sulfide and then oxidized. I'm talking about the Western Slope Zone. That this IP target is even more exciting under that. I mean, we've known about the IP anomaly for a while, but I think as we've progressed, I think it has become a better and more exciting target because of the potential, for the sulfide deposit there.
Right. And I just can't get away from that the structural story that you guys have and the large area of alteration, and now you're drilling into that area and you're hitting some pretty impressive numbers, thickness and grade.
Yeah, no, it's really exciting. The other thing is, we're getting, there's a lot of, as there's a lot of majors that have increased their activity in the Walker Lane. Obviously, Goldfield with Centerra, and then we just talked about Bullfrog and Beatty. Kinross is very active in the Walker Lane. They have a big project just a few miles from us. So, we think this is a really up and coming address. And so we're excited that we picked up this project when we did. And we've been very fortunate with the success we've had to date.
And being able to grab that other land too, staking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because on the other side of the mountain, part of the claim block we picked up, there is historical workings where, I think I told you this before, but we pretty much went back and read every old newspaper that talked about every working that existed in this area. And there were lots of high-grade occurrences of both precious metals and base metals on Palmetto Mountain. And so that was part of what we picked up.
Well, and that's near where that 1,000-meter step out or 1,000-foot step out is. And what interests me about that area is you seem to have a confluence of the east-west fault. I guess I should go like this. And then there's a series of faults right at that Palmetto in between those two. So it looks like you've got some really good rock preparation happening up there, or over there, I guess, to the east.
Well, one thing we've learned, Allan, is that a lot of time in ore deposits, the more screwed up it is with faulting, and that's why it had open conduits, and that's where things precipitated out. So there is a lot of structure in there, and we've looked at all of these things. You've got all kinds of strikes and dips throughout there. So, but the main trend is east-west. It's very strong, and of course, that's what the Western Slope Zone is, and it's on the south part of that. But there's still the old Buster Zone. You know, they mined about, I don't know, 40,000 ounces of a half-ounce gold, you know, back in the late 1800s. But you know, it never was systematically explored until really just about 10 or 12 years ago. Nubian had it, and they put in several holes and were reasonably successful. And that gave us a springboard to go ahead and look at what they did and then chase it. And we actually discovered these new zones that they were near, but they didn't have anywhere near the kind of thickness and grades that we're encountering now.
And that was a bit of a step out that you did with those 3 holes away from everything.
Well, they were fairly close because we didn't want to miss it. And, you know, it had when we looked at that, it could have gone east-west or almost north-south and anything in between. And so it took us to do this phase 2 program to go ahead and define what we have. Now we can go with further step outs. And as we go further east and west of there, we can put in fences of holes so that we know we're going to hit it and then trace it out. And if there is structures in there that are offsetting, we can chase those offsets. So that's what we want to do. And like I say, geez, we've got this great intercept 1,000 feet to the west. And I mean, that thing is being as shallow as it is. I mean, the thing starts at 20 feet.
Yeah, and the other thing, you know, there was, but you're right, Allan, there was actually very little drilling right in the area of the Western Slope. There was one hole that Dave and Ken and Don were targeting, which was GE8, and it had a deeper, higher grade intercept, and that was one of the historical holes that led us to that area. And so that's why, like, when Dave talks about what, I don't think he used the drill hole, but GE14, the eastern hole, even though it's, you know, 80 or 100 feet at a gram, there's a high grade component to that. So who knows what's around there, you know? And so, you know, so you got to follow, you know, we're trying to follow the gold, follow the high grade gold, and keep it simple and build on what we've done so far.
Well, from an arm waving perspective, based on geology, I'm not just waving my arms, but you've got that southeast core structural area with the IP. Then you've got faulting that continues on the north and south of that, all the way over to Palmetto, where you've got all these faults, and in between all that is a big area of alteration. So it looks like you guys got a hell of a runway to grow this thing.
Yeah, no, we absolutely do. We really think, you know, we got the old tiger by the tail, so we just got to tame it now.
Well, you've got some good guys there to help you tame it, John.
Yeah, I absolutely do. No, I'm, like I said earlier, I'm really fortunate to have guys like Dave on my team. I mean, Dave and I talk almost every day, and Dave has spent out, you know, hundreds of hours looking at every historic drill hole and helping us with our, you know, plans. And I rely heavily on my dream team.
I also noticed as I was doing my arm waving there, I got a smile out of Dave, and I think that's a good sign, because usually arm waving turns into this, but it looks like you guys could have lots of room there, Dave.
Well, when someone else arm waves, I can agree with that.
Well, I think that it's arm waving based on some reality.
Absolutely.
Well, we're chomping at the bit really to go ahead and drill holes east and west of this zone and trace it out. But you know, you have to have funding, and you know, the price of gold is still strong. The investment sentiment is I don't know, different. But in any event, we've got some solid information and solid results that we just need to trace out. and it's going to take some additional funding. And I think with our next program, I think we can generate even a lot more enthusiasm and start adding to this thing.
Well, you've definitely got my enthusiasm because I know how difficult it is to find something like this in Nevada. And, you know, that puts the company into a pretty special category. And, you know, for investors out there that would be cutting checks, I think there's a pretty attractive risk reward opportunity here, John.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were saying, well, if you could get to that 300,000 ounces, that should give you a market cap of 100 million, which would be a 10x. And I'm like, well, I like like Dave was saying, I like that arm waving, but so yeah, we're pretty excited. We are going to do a small raise. Insiders are going to participate, and so we're going to, we're not going to do a huge offering because we want to keep the dilution to a minimum, but we are going to do a small raise here very soon. So we'll keep you posted on that.
Speaking of the share structure, how much stock is out on the company and what is the insiders' interest?
There's about 136 million shares total. So at 8 cents Canadian, call that just a little bit around 10 million plus or minus. And then Nubian owns 50 million shares. We got the project from them, and so they originally were going to distribute those shares, but after we hit the high grade, they've elected to hang on to them for now. And smart decision on their part. And then my partner, John Gibbs, and myself own about 50 million shares. So there's 100 of your 135. So there's about, call it 30 or 35 in the public float.
Wow, that's an excellent share structure and ownership concentration. And if you can get those vendors to keep holding their stock like insiders, that's always a good sign.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there needs to be more alignment with ownership and management in these projects and these companies. Like I saw, like when Sabina did their deal recently, it's like, well, the management has 1%, and they're voting in favor of the deal. And so and obviously Sabina has a long history and a very successful project and raised a ton of money and $1 billion market cap, et cetera. But you want management to be motivated for the long-term terminal value, not for their next paycheck per se.
Absolutely. And it's one of the key things that I look for, John, for specifically when you look at something like Sabina. When the insiders only own 1% of the stock and they've got golden parachutes, a take under is possible because the average shareholder is probably in at under the offer price. I think that happens less when the insiders own a big chunk of the company.
Absolutely. No, totally agreed. Yep. And hats off to those guys. They developed a great project but I'm with you. We're not in this. We run this company on a shoestring. We want to spend every penny we can in the field and advance our project. And so no, we're pretty excited. And there's, like you alluded to, I can't point to another junior that's had this type of shallow, high grade oxide intercepts in Nevada in recent history.
Especially if you put a sub $10 million criteria on it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I like our risk reward. We're all in this for, as they call it, terminal value. Hopefully that doesn't mean, the end of our days, but we're in it for the to build a company here and build something that we all can be proud of.
Well, I think you've definitely got the start of that, and I'll get the word out when you announce a private placement there, and maybe some of my friends will jump at the opportunity.
Yeah, well, that sounds good. We really appreciate your time and thank you. We love sponsoring your show. You do a great job, and we're proud to be a part of your extended team here.
Well, I really appreciate it because it helps me get content out there, and I believe you guys got a story that needs to be told, and I'm glad that I get to tell it.
Yeah, no, we appreciate it. And I wanted you to meet Dave. He's been a very valuable member of our team, and And he usually layers in a few jokes, and we haven't heard those today. So,
well, we got him smiling anyways when when I did some arm waving there.
yep, you did. You did.
Well, Alan, we share your enthusiasm.
Ah, excellent, excellent. Well, my enthusiasm comes from about 30 years of exploration in the business. And, you know, I've had some fabulous mentors in geology, geochemistry, and geophysics. And I've also had the opportunity to interview a lot of really sharp people that helped me, mentor me. And Dave, you've been very helpful, as Don Strachan was in our previous interview.
Well, Alan, as I tell everybody, the first mine I worked in was 61 years ago, but mind you, I was only 5 at the time.
Exactly, exactly. There you go. They got you that child labor was legal back then.
Yeah.
And I cut my baby teeth in mining.
Well, thanks a lot, guys. I'm going to wrap it up, and we can have a chat at the other end.
Okay. Thanks,
Okay.
Alan. Appreciate your
All
time.
right, thank you.
So I started this show by saying that this is a unique opportunity. I would start with the valuation of the company under $10 million. Then I would look at the drill results that they have had recently with some really good looking numbers in oxides. Then I would go to what Don Strachan and I talked about, which is the structural story and the big alteration. And we've had a great chat with Dave today to learn more about this. And as I've talked to Don and Dave, it just gives me more confidence that the company is onto something unique and does provide an excellent opportunity for investors that like to look at gold exploration in Nevada, which I certainly do. So on that note, my shows are for information purposes only. Always important for you to speak with your financial advisors before making any investment decision, and do your homework. There's good research out there. I think a good place to start is in these 2 interviews that we've done with Dave Belling and John and Don Strachan, that you can find on my YouTube channel at Rocks and Stocks News, or on my Substack at rocksandstocks.substack.com. On that note, have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.